Welcome to the MMHP and the 99. Podcasting from the Michigan Rock Legends Hall of Fame in downtown Bay City. Channeling all styles and eras of Michigan music history. From the city by the bay. And now, Dr. J, Sir Fred, Mr. Mike, and your host, Scott Baker.
I searched Band Canyon, Willard Kehoe, Jim Atherton, and a few other things just to see what I could figure out. But yeah, I found some more information about the pot bust, a few more articles about the pot bust.
Okay.
At Delta.
There was one at Delta. Oh, you mean
at the Delta offices?
Well, that wasn't really. That was in
one.
At the Delta offices.
No, the Delta Pop Festival.
Oh no!
Oh no! This is at the Delta Promotions offices. They arrested Hokot
Delta
and
Promotion.
Atherton and all those.
Oh, that was at their. That was at a house.
Yeah, it's referred to in one of the articles as like a clubhouse or something.
Well, it was a house where all the members of Dick Rabbit were living. Atherton was living there. Mark Farner was living there until about a week before the bust. He got scared because they were pretty careless about marijuana. They were selling it there, and so yeah, it was a house. It was on Jenny, which is now a one-way going out of Bay City to get to I-75. But they did some urban renewal, whatever, in that it's not like it was back when the bust occurred.
No, Mark Farner lived in a house on Henry across the street from Family Video also.
Yeah, that was probably after he moved out of the one at, on Jenny.
Okay.
Yeah, because I had some friends that visited him over there at that house.
Yeah, I found some more information about the Archies suit. The Archies,
okay.
Kirshner going after Kehoe, and we also just found the court records for the actual court case.
The marijuana case?
No, this is for the actual shutdown of Delta Promotions.
Oh, really?
By Kirshner, by Don Kirshner.
Wow.
There was actually court proceedings. My writing partner found the court documents. I will share them with you when I have
Wow,
them.
that's awesome.
Ooh. Did you go to Delta Promotions and do some hanging out? I see you had the photo on it from that old story. But
Yeah, we went out there last time.
The tape just left.
I got you.
Yeah, we could probably get in there if you wanted to take a look at the inside.
You think so?
who gets in there?
Bob Pollock is a board member.
So how did you got all that this week or last day or so?
Pretty much
Yeah.
in the court proceedings we knew were out there, but we just got them. So.
Maybe we should hold off.
Let's save it
on
up.
this.
Yeah, some of this I will. Some of that stuff I can talk about. Some of it I can't. I don't want to give anything away that's going to be. In
Oh,
the
yeah,
podcast,
sure.
but-
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, we're just saying, you've been continuing to do some
That's-
research.
Yeah, of course.
In Bay City, and we'll leave it at that.
Sounds good.
We're back here at the Michigan Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame in Bay City, Michigan. And tonight, Mr. Daniel Ralston's in the house. How you doing, Dan?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for flying in and hanging out in town and doing some digging. We've been through some of Daniel's lists and stories that Gary shared with us, and talked to you on the phone briefly, and know that you like to do some digging on some Michigan rock and roll stuff that we're going to talk about tonight. Thank you for all you've done, man.
Oh, thank you.
That brings it puts a nice little that little curve into the history here, especially coming out of the 60s, into the 70s when everything was kind of free.
Well, Daniel's story, which came out in 2016, was the biggest Michigan rock and roll story in some time. And I firmly believe that the Zombies would not have been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame had that story not come out, because that brought a lot of attention to that band who had probably pretty much been kind of forgotten about over the years.
True, and they reunited, put out that new record, and tour, and
did the tour, did the entire Odyssey and Oracle album.
Yeah.
Daniel, you saw it where? Did you?
I've seen them play many, many times. And the Odyssey and Oracle show I've seen a few times. I saw it in New York, and I saw it in LA too. With one of the nice things about the Zombies is that younger bands love the Zombies.
Yeah.
So I've gotten to see them play with Arcade Fire and a bunch of other bands who worship them.
Wow,
I think they're
that's
like the greatest
fantastic,
band
right?
of all time, which is nice. I've gotten to see them at beautiful places like the Greek Theater, and it's pretty great considering before I wrote this story, they were my favorite band, and
It's crazy.
And now I'll talk about this a little more later, but what that band is doing now, currently,
Yeah.
at almost 80 years old,
Mm-hmm.
is a miracle. They play the songs in the original keys.
Right.
Colin still sounds exactly the
Oh,
same.
yeah. The videos I saw were amazing.
And he told me that we can dive into this, but 15 years ago, he basically like had somebody teach him how to sing properly, an opera singing coach.
After all those years.
Yeah.
He had been just working the voice hard, and obviously he has that natural, 60s sound to his voice, but it wasn't maintainable past a certain point. He had to learn to sing from every other part of his body and a half-hour warm-ups every day before they play, and it's a lot of work to keep it where it is, but
For his age, too. I mean, maintaining it at his age is for anybody's age, but when you're older, you really want to put on that show every night if you're back on tour. So
Yeah, he had such a distinct voice in the 1960s. I mean, as soon as you heard Colin Blunstone's vocals, you knew it was the Zombies.
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's some great stuff. I love that band.
I remember when, what year did they get inducted in the Hall of Fame?
Wow, that's a good one. I think
Right
it
after
was.
the story, right?
Yeah, Lynn and I went to Cleveland, and we saw it on closed circuit TV at the Hall of Fame. We had our favorite bands, the Zombies, Roxy Music, The Cure, Stevie Nicks.
Last 5 years.
Yeah, it was a pretty good lineup going into the Hall of Fame. But unfortunately, a lot of people, they do the big inductions at the Hall of Fame a little differently. When they started out, it was for the members. You could come in. Now they open it up to anybody that wants to come in, and the lineup was unbelievable. Just lined up, I don't know how far to get in there. And there was a lot of drinking and a lot of younger people and a lot of people who didn't really know who the Zombies were and didn't maybe appreciate their performance at the Hall of Fame as was warranted, I thought. But, either way, it is what it is. It was fun to see him being inducted, though. And I saw him in New York also.
Oh, you went to New York and saw him, too?
Yeah, well, when we're in New Jersey, getting into New York isn't that difficult. And we saw him at a beautiful theater in New York. It was really fun to see him.
I remember when they reunited, though, just speaking of that, the Pop Collective around the world was already going nuts about it. But our little, the Reed recording and Andy Reid and the gang, all the guys that he's played with over the years, they're kind of all friends of friends on Facebook. And it was like everybody was on board with it just to check out the reunion. It was like the pop world opened itself back up to this.
It was great.
This
It was
little
great
gem
for
that's
them.
been missing.
Yeah, and a lot of attention to that Odyssey and Oracle album, which I think is one of the really top albums of the 60s. It's really great. It's a pop album, but it does have a little bit of psychedelia in there. And
What are your memories, Freddie? Not
really.
Yeah, Mike, were you tuned into it?
I like the
Move
Zombies.
that mic to you
Just
closer.
heard them on the radio.
Move that mic closer
Yeah.
to you.
well,
too.
the thing about the Zombies.
From the radio.
You didn't buy stuff back then?
No.
Oh,
Well, their appearance. It's funny that they sort of describe themselves sometimes as like the luckiest unlucky band or the unluckiest lucky band. It's like they had two huge hits here in the States in the mid '60s. She's Not There, Tell Her No. But those songs didn't do great back in England. And then by the time Time of the Season came out, the reason my story happens is because the Zombies are essentially broken up.
yeah.
Time of the Season does nothing in England, and they still remain not as popular there as they are here, even though they are English.
Wow.
Now they're getting some maybe a little bit of a later push from a legacy perspective, but they're not revered there the way that they are here.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And our listeners may be listening and going, what does this have to do with Michigan music history? And I think that's the next deep dive here. You're going to get to hear about Daniel's digging up of what happened out of Bay City
yes, an incredible Bay City story.
and tying into Texas as well as ZZ Top and beyond, and a couple other bands, the Excels from the UP as well.
Right.
And Tell us about how did you guys meet, Gary and Daniel, and how did you guys meet because of the story, or did you come to him, or how did this go?
I came to Gary. Gary's an important piece of this puzzle, and this would not have happened without him. I want to be very clear about that, and I appreciate him so much. But I read one sentence in this book about the zombies. There's a cheap paperback biography, and it said in the book, one sentence, and that was, groups went around the country pretending to be the zombies. Went around America pretending to be the zombies. Nothing further.
Yeah.
Because there were no details.
Right.
Except for the little bit that, I'm sorry, your friend who had written the original story?
Well,
for his
Steve Seymour, who had a website called Rock and Roll Graffiti, and Steve's focus was on the Upper Peninsula, and so we had got to know each other simply because I didn't know very much about Upper Peninsula bands when I started the Michigan Rock and Roll Legends website, and so I kind of relied on him. So we passed information back and forth, and what led Daniel to me was Steve had got some pictures of the fake zombies. They appeared in the Upper Peninsula, and what he had was a promotional photo that had Delta Promotions Bay City down at the bottom. And so he wrote me, sent me a picture, about these zombies. Well, I saw the picture, being a Zombies fan, I knew those weren't the zombies. But I said I'd look into it, and I just happened to be doing a couple of stories on Band Canyon. And I had, one of them dealt with bands that played there but never made a record. And in that particular case, I happened upon a guy by the name of Richie Schultz. And Richie played with a Delta band called Junior Lewis and the Selections. So I had talked to him about this Band Canyon story, and then I went back to him since he was a guy that was at Delta Promotions, and it was Richie who told me that he thought that Dusty Hill might have played with the Zombies, through Delta Promotions while he was there with Junior Lewis and the Selections. So I gave that information back to Steve Seymour. He wrote an article on it, and I think I'll let you pick it up. That's where you saw it, right?
And that photo that he's describing actually is there's a promotional photo that it's in my story on BuzzFeed of the fake zombies.
And that's the Excels one.
This is the Texas zombies.
Oh, okay, so it's one with Dusty and Frank.
Yeah, they were the first fake zombies.
Now there's another important side of this. So there's the Michigan side, and then after I read that one sentence in the book about the fake zombies, I started doing some deep Googling. And I remember I was on the 34th or 35th page, and I found this blog post from a guy named Mark Ramsey. And it was mostly recollections of his guitar collection and how much he loved playing guitar and this SG and a hummingbird that he had and all this stuff. And sort of the subtext of the story was like, oh, by the way, these are all photos of my old guitars and my old time in my band. And the band happened to be with Dusty Hill and Frank Beard and a guy who was a Texas blues guitar legend named Seb Meter. And he was in the fake zombies, and one of the pictures that he had on his blog post was the Delta Promotions photo that Gary had. And when I put those two together, everything came together.
Really?
And Mark Ramsey ended up being a really important part of the story.
Yeah.
He's kind of the hero of the story in a way. He's the one who didn't make it. He's the one you're kind of rooting for as you read it. But two of the guys from the fake zombies go on to be millionaires and legends.
Yeah.
The other guy dies early, but in Texas blues circles is considered like one of the great guitarists of all time. And Mark was, he became a school teacher. Wow. And it wasn't necessarily a fond remembrance for him, I'd say. And initially he was very excited about the idea. And then when I was getting ready to fly down to Dallas, he said, don't come unless you bring money.
Really?
And I said, okay, I'm a writer. I don't do that. I'm sorry. So he ended up talking to me on the phone a few times, and emailing with me, and I talked to his former girlfriend who he was still friends with from back in the day. And we were able to get the story together, but Mark's story, in my opinion, was not told totally. And now as we're working to retell the story, I'm going to make sure that Mark's story is told right this time.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah. And
he's still around?
He is not.
Oh.
But there are some interesting connections to him. They're going to be a part of this next story. So, yes, you'll hear more about Mark's situation. And then, as you can tell maybe from the article, or for people who haven't read it, the guys in ZZ Top, it took them months to even admit that this ever happened, despite the fact that we had photos of it. And we had photos of them on tour. Yeah. But part of ZZ Top's legacy is that, you know, they rolled up off the Dust Bowl in Texas.
Yeah, the ZZ Top legend.
Yeah. But the reality is that they spent a year putting on frilly clothes, faking British accents, and pretending to be the Zombies.
It's signing their name with someone else's on it,
yes,
right?
Yeah. So I think now we're at a point with them, and even with their management, where we all agree that it's funny and kind of badass that they did it. So, yeah, we're getting a little bit more cooperation now.
Do you think you'll get Frank Beard to talk about it?
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so, because Dusty Hill, of course, just passed away here not too long ago. So.
And reading the story that's on the Rock Hall Legends site of yours, you quote Dusty in it a few times.
Yes, he did give us an email response 3 days before the story came out, just confirming, yes, this happened. It was the 60s. It was a crazy time. But the interesting thing for me is that the Texas end of it is cool, but this is a Bay City story. Like, the whole operation, like, it's such a perfect place to try to pull this kind of thing off. You're a little bit far removed from things.
Yeah.
And there's not going to be a lot of people asking questions. And as Gary knows, it wasn't until somebody with the clout of Don Kirshner, the guy who created the Monkees and created the Archies, who was another one of Delta's fake bands. Yep. It wasn't until somebody with that kind of clout could get involved that this got shut down. He was really the only one with the power to do it. And it's also an era when, I mean, I'm sure, you know, we obviously, rock music is a business way more now than it ever has been. But at that point, it was kind of just becoming a real legitimate business. And before that, it was, you know, I talked to a guy today named, you know, Joel Selvin.
No.
He was the critic for the San Francisco Chronicle for a long time. And he covered The Last Waltz and all this stuff. And he wrote a book about music and the mob and its connections, rock music's connections to organized crime all over the place. And while I don't think the Delta Promotions team was necessarily hardened criminals or anything to that, I think it was a situation, and even you can tell in my favorite part of the whole story is that Bill Kehoe, one of the co-founders of Delta here in Bay City, was that he publishes this letter where he quits the music industry and says he hates all bands and he hates the whole idea of this whole thing. And it's just really funny to me because it does sort of come across, and he's a little bit older than everybody else involved in the story. Like, this is a guy who was just like, I see a cash grab opportunity here, and I'm gonna squeeze it as hard as I can.
That's wild.
You know, and that happened right at the point where, you know, we're talking about you know, rock and roll becoming big business. That kind of brought the teen club era to a close, you know, because now the teen clubs can't afford to bring in bands like the Byrds and Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs and you know, the Animals and all these different people that appeared at these teen clubs, in fact, right in the Tri-City area. So, yeah, Delta Promotions really kind of lost a lot of their income. Now they can't book those bands like they could back, you know, a couple years before. You could book bands every weekend all over Michigan. You know, every city had a teen club in a dance, and they wanted a live band. And so that was right at that point, and that's where he sees apparently that opportunity where he can make actually more money.
Yeah.
Because now, you know, you're playing a lot bigger gigs. And you're plugging right into that.
Yeah, to piggyback off that, Gary sent me a flyer last week for a run of shows at a club in Chicago that has the fake Zombies on it, and the real Led Zeppelin and the real Eric Burdon are on the same calendar in the same month.
Whoa.
So this guy they were pretty brazen with what they were doing.
Yeah.
It really is.
Wow.
Pretty wild.
Yeah, and they mostly booked outside of Michigan for the most part, especially when the XLs, the second Fake Zombies group, came on the scene, because they were very well known in Michigan. They played at, the Band Canyon, Daniel's Den, the Blue Light in Midland. They played all over the state. So they had to book them out, out west and so on. But yeah, it was very profitable.
I was also noticing in the story too that you wrote that the XLs pulled it off a little more than the Texas version, because they really played into the hand of it, minus keyboard player obviously or whatever. But
well, they had a keyboard player.
Oh, did they? That one did.
The XLs did.
Yeah, and they were kind of like their image when they were one of the top groups to play the teen clubs was the Beach Boys. They had if you remember in the 60s, the short sleeve striped shirts.
Yeah.
And they had the harmonies down. So they did a much better job of being the Zombies than the Texas guys did.
Well, that's kind of the badass part, right? For the Texas guys, is that they went out and they played Time of the Season and then an hour of Texas blues. They did not care.
Right.
They were just like, it was a gig. And I think Mark Ramsey said, I made $200 a week and I was a bored kid in Texas. Like, there you go. That's all I needed.
Yeah,
that's all I needed.
Wow, fantastic.
But Delta was making a lot more money.
Yeah,
yes,
than they were paying those
checks
guys.
were coming in.
Yeah, exactly.
Incredible. Well, I remember when that sparked interest and it started to go onto the blogs everywhere, and people were, as a journalist myself, I was like, oh, look at this, and I saw that you had it on your page and so on and so forth. And so I was catching up when you wrote that story. It started getting pinged here and there, and just the tie to Bay City alone was like, wow, this is incredible.
You guys got a real special place here. Seriously.
Really,
the musical history
cool.
here is amazing.
It is.
Yeah.
Do you remember what year you started digging into this thing? And when you contacted me, it was probably 2014 or 15, right?
Yeah, I worked on it before it was published. I spent well, actually, let me back up a little bit. So I got kind of a late start as a writer. I didn't write the first thing I ever wrote until I was 35.
Okay.
I always had office jobs, just on a different track, but a music obsessive. My friends and I in high school would drive 2,000 miles to see a band that 50 people wanted to see.
That's cool.
I was obsessed with the stuff I was into. And the Zombies are a band who they are in some ways we're probably pretty close in age. The Zombies in some ways are kind of the first record collector band. They're not the Beatles, they're not the Stones, they're not at that huge level. And then you meet somebody who knows good music, like everybody here, and somebody's like, "Oh, you meet a 14-year-old kid, and they're like, I love the Beatles." You're like, "If you like the Beatles, you'll love the Zombies," and then they do. Because when you go see the Zombies now, it's a lot of teenagers there.
Oh yeah, it's
still they got the flower power '60s hippie thing that I think will never go away for teenagers. It's always going to be some teenagers who are into that thing.
Yeah,
and I think I read this sentence in the book, and then I remember the first thing I did was me and my friend Jeff in New York. He's an amazing singer, songwriter. He's in a band called Thursday, an incredible emo band. I told him about this, and he said, we should write a movie about this. So before I ever wrote the article, I wrote a fictitious screenplay based on a band going around pretending to be the Zombies. Of course, it's nothing like what the truth ended up being.
Right.
But the idea was so compelling to me.
Yeah.
And it was just a random day then, maybe a year later, I was like, I'm going to start doing some research, see if there's any more stuff on this Fake Zombies thing. And that led me to Michigan, and that led me to Texas.
Yeah, I remember distinctly when you called me. It was at least 3 years after I had given that information to Steve Seymour, and I hadn't really thought about it anymore. And when you called, and you had mentioned something about Fake Zombies, I think I said, "Are you talking about the Living Dead?"
Yeah.
It didn't register what you were talking about, until you explained it a little bit further. And I said, "Oh, yes. Okay."
Yeah. That's funny, because that was a huge thing then too.
Oh yeah.
That show that came out. I mean, all of it.
But it was a lot of fun digging into it.
Yeah. I remember for a long time when you Googled Fake Zombies, it was just a bunch of like people's homemade zombie costumes or something like that, and then eventually it became like a kind of a phrase amongst like music writer people, and like it has been a really cool thing, and it opened some doors for me. Like I wrote some smaller like magazine articles and stuff like that. But the big lesson that I took from it is that the kind of stuff that I love and I want to work on is the stuff that, first of all, takes me this long to do. I think especially in this age of like AI, can I curse? AI bullshit. And, computers are going to write stories for us. Computers can't come and do what I'm doing right now. No. And they never will.
No.
You know?
They can't dig up the history.
And I hope to be able to preserve that kind of
wonderful
working tradition. Now, does not always work out financially. I'm a bartender 50% of the time too.
In LA?
Yeah.
Which bar?
I work I can say I work at a private club in downtown LA. It actually has a really great history. It was founded by the first black mayor of LA, who felt that the other private clubs in LA were all too racist. So he started his own. We have an amazing, diverse membership, and it's the best job I think I've ever had. I love it. And it's the kind of job where I can tell them I need to go away for a month and write something, and they're like, "We'll see you in a month. We'll put something in the newsletter about you." Like they're
supportive.
They are very supportive, which
and
has
you're
made
from
this
Pennsylvania?
possible. I am. Okay. Yeah. And for the past 4 years, I've been working on an even crazier story than the fake zombie story. It's a little darker, a little deeper. It will be out soon. I can't say too much about it other than it's about one of the members of the band Iron Butterfly and his disappearance.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's a strange
the keyboard player.
He was the bassist.
Oh, the bassist.
And he was also a rocket scientist. And
the bassist. Now, originally was he the bassist?
No, he was their second bass player.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That I know that. Okay. Yeah. Their original bass player, when they played Michigan a lot, I would interview him, and we'd go hang out. I'd take him to clubs around town.
Oh, interesting.
That was I'm trying to think of his name. He passed away a few years ago. But
yeah, I know who you're talking about.
He was such a great guy. Anyway, the drummer and him would always come around, and they played twice here in Bay City for particular events at the downtown at the Friendship Shell, and I covered it for the Times. And matter of fact, one of the cool stories about Iron Butterfly, did not to change the subject.
No, please go ahead.
Is like it was Joe the drummer, and the bass player was I can't think of his name offhand. Anyway, they were all like, I was like, I was coming from a jam band, so I'm like, do you guys ever sit in with bands and jam? He goes, we never play with anybody. The guitar player had been with him for a real long time, and he's like, dude, this guy's never do nothing like that. So they're like, where are we going tonight after dinner? So we had steaks downtown it was Hereford and Hops at the time in Bay City. Mm-hmm. I took him down, and Counting the Change was playing at O'Hare's.
Oh, sure.
And I'm like, my buddy Swift's playing tonight, and Butch Burton of from
Counting the Colony
is there. And I walk in with these guys, and I whisper to Swiv, I says, these guys, this is Iron Butterfly. He's like, really? They want to play Inagata-Davida? So I whisper into Joe's ear, and he goes, I ain't never jammed with no one, man. I says, just go do it, man. Have fun with it. You guys are out on town. And they looked, and they said, all right. The whole band got up and jammed with those guys into Inagata-Davida. And they did it. Must have been a half-hour version.
Version, the original was one side of an album.
Full of every keyboard solo and everything you think of. But,
that's great.
Yeah, they're kind of a funny band. They're like kind of the definitive one-hit wonder. Like that song, they were the first platinum band ever. I mean, you pretty much can't have a bigger hit than that.
That was gigantic. Yes.
Yeah.
And like Time of the Season by the Zombies, one of those songs that you can put on in a movie, like if a movie needs to set the mood that it's 1969, you play one of those two songs. You play Time of the Season, or you play Inagata-Davida.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
Yeah. Incredible. I can't wait for that story.
Yeah, it's going to be a good one. I'm psyched about it.
When do you have the release for that?
We're hoping for beginning of next year. I think it'll probably be out. We're in editing now, and it's taken us 4 years to make it. It's been that complicated a story. There's rocket scientists, top secret military clearances, all kinds of stuff that were real roadblocks. Like, I had to learn about rocket science before I could get too deep into this. So, I like to take my time with these things, and I'm actually hoping to get to the point where I can speed this process up a little bit.
Are you think you're going to go back to BuzzFeed or?
BuzzFeed doesn't exist anymore. The news division
Really?
doesn't exist.
Wow.
I wrote that for their news division, and not to get too deep into the weeds about like the business part of it, but BuzzFeed. I own the rights to the story. So when somebody was like, "Oh, we should make a movie out of this," like they didn't have to call BuzzFeed; they just called me. So,
So it's a pitchfork type thing nowadays.
as far as like
sales, like where do you head with that now?
my Iron Butterfly thing, I've done entirely independently with a producing partner, small podcast house, and then we've been shopping it around.
Oh, so
but it's done
as a podcast.
It's ready to come out.
Okay.
Now, like we could put it out ourselves.
So it's not a story. It's a podcast.
It's a podcast.
Story.
We decided to go straight to audio because it's a real. Somebody referred to it as a Shaggy Dog story, and it is kind of a Shaggy Dog story. It's got a lot of different tales we had to chase, and we're like, this has to be an audio. It's going to end up being like 5 hours long.
Sweet.
Yeah, and then a couple of like other writing things. I wrote a obituary of Prince. One of the obituaries for Prince in Time magazine when they put out like the commemorative Prince edition.
Yeah.
And I specifically wrote about his Rock and Roll Hall of Fame guitar solo when he's playing with Tom Petty.
Oh yeah,
Maybe
so excellent.
One of the greatest moments in music history. And I basically just did like a second by second breakdown of what makes that performance special. I wrote it on my own personal Medium page, and then like a couple of days later, somebody from Time called me and was like, "Can we put that in a magazine?" I was like, "Yeah, of course you can."
Right.
Like it was a really strange thing to happen. And then like I said, I write when I can, and then my main focus has been this Iron Butterfly story for the past few years. It's been like writing a book, basically. Mm-hmm. And then a couple months ago, this opportunity to do a Fake Zombies podcast came along. People are like still weirdly 6 years after the story, still kind of talk about it, which is awesome. And it's not something I ever expected in a million years. Especially because it was sort of like the first thing I ever wrote.
Well, for the podcast here, that's always been a topic Gary and I have spent time talking about, going back to that. It's like one of those little history digging things. Thank God you guys did all that. And I always said to Gary, man, do we know anybody? And we thought, he goes, well, this guy's dead, and this guy won't get a hold of me, and this guy does this. And Jim Atherton popped up. Well, I don't know if Gary told you before coming in here tonight, but we've had 3 guests that have been booked to be on the show that have all passed away just before they've been on the show. Matter of fact, Dusty Beard died right after all that happened, and we're like, or not Dusty Beard, Dusty Hill.
Dusty Hill.
And I'm like, this is just weird how, not that we would have had him on the show, but all those little things leading to this Delta Promotions thing is kind of drying up. It's like, oh my goodness, are we ever going to get a good story? Thank God you're in town.
Yeah, and we actually found somebody who was very close with Atherton, who's going to be able to give us the whole story, which I'm incredibly excited about.
Without a doubt.
And part of coming here was just realizing that there is something, not to sound like some California hippie, but like there's like some energy for me to being here. Like it feels like I couldn't have done this without coming here.
Right.
And already people have come into my purview, just like randomly meeting people, talking to them on the street, in a restaurant.
Yeah.
It's like it is something. There's something special about going and doing reporting like this that opens so many doors.
And some of those places are still here. I mean, the building for Band Canyon is still around in its original form. The Delta Promotions office, the second one that was out on Tuscola Road, is still there.
Yeah.
It was kind of interesting. I was digging around, after you contacted me again. I went back and I wanted to try and find out what was that building before it became Delta Promotions. It was a trucking company, which I could probably guess because of the 2 garages. But that company went out of business in 1965. And so it was a vacant building for at least 3 years before Kehoe set up his offices there.
And
Kehoe's original was on Euclid.
Okay.
And it was originally the building was a Harold Alexander tire warehouse. And I think he had a big incentive to move because about a quarter of a mile down the road on Euclid was the state police post. So after the big bust, which was, headline in Bay City Times when that happened, it probably, I don't think Kehoe was probably real comfortable about having his office just down the road from the state police post. So,
Right.
Tuscola Road is on the other side of town, quite a few miles away from Euclid.
Yeah. I just remember driving by it as a kid and seeing that Leisure Living up there, not knowing what it was, a furniture store or whatever.
Yeah.
And it also had the Rated X movie theater on Tuscola.
Well,
just down from there, too.
Later on, but the Tuscola was the drive-in. It was a family, just like any drive-in theater, just like the Starlight was for years.
Okay.
I mean, we used, Lynn and I, we would take our son and, he had a little thing he could sleep in the back with a screen on it so the mosquitoes wouldn't get at him. And so, we would go out there and see
I've
the movie.
I've probably seen movies there,
he
too.
would fall asleep in the back seat and,
Crazy.
it was
that
nice.
Tuscola strip, when it came to my world that was Delta Promotions, I was like, I just want to sneak in there and see what paperwork's left there.
Well, then another kind of a strange thing is my good friend Larry Van Cleve, he had these bound editions of Rolling Stone. Great big leather bound things. And I'm trying to think I guess he was moving. He didn't have room for them. Larry is a real collector of music as well as books. And he just asked me if I would like them. And so, I'll take them. I've always been a fan of Rolling Stone magazine, especially in the early years.
Yeah.
And so when Daniel contacted me, I had the issues of the 2 stories that came out in Rolling Stone about the fake zombies.
Written by Ben Fong Torres,
Yes.
legendary music journalist. He's a character in the movie Almost Famous.
Yeah.
And he's actually, we talked to him last week, which is
Wonderful.
great. He has zero memory of writing the story at all, which he's just, he probably wrote a million stories, but he's like, I don't remember this. He's like, it's interesting, but I don't remember it.
Did you have to send him a copy of it?
We did, and then we actually got him to read it, which is cool. Like read the stories.
Yeah.
So in his voice. But yeah, the first, I think it's the first 7 or 8 years now of Rolling Stone are still not online, and that book is the only place you can get them outside of people who saved the print copies. And those books go on eBay now for thousands of dollars because it's the only place you can get it. Just don't tell your friend that.
No, you don't want to cut
all the gold that's in there. Yeah. Did you? We talked about somebody that had boxes of stuff that when they passed away, their kid. You said I found out the kids just threw all the boxes to the road. Was it that guy's stuff that was from the road? I remember you saying that had zombie stuff. You thought in receipts and stuff. Wasn't that the story?
Well, it could have been Kehoe.
His
he
kid,
must
his family.
Well, I tried to track them down, but Kehoe's wife passed away, and I could not find his sons. In fact, Lynn and I went on a search where I thought I had tracked him down up in West Branch, and I had an address, and so Lynn went with me, and it was winter time, and I couldn't find the address, but I saw this road, and I said, maybe it's up there. Completely covered with ice. So we're driving it down, and Lynn's telling me, we shouldn't be doing this. So I get up there, and I see that it's just really a kind of like a fire road. Yeah. There's no houses, but there's no way to turn around. So I'm trying to back down on a solid, icy path. Naturally, fall off the road. We're stuck in the middle. I mean, the middle of nowhere. Oh yeah, Lynn was not.
Still married.
Lynn was not. She was not happy with me.
Where is she? She has around the corner here.
We don't want to hear from her on this one. But we eventually got out. We were able to call it a tow truck to get us and pull us out. Wow. It was not easy.
Wow.
So I took her out to dinner that night and tried to mend the fence a little bit.
Well, the people putting boxes out at the curb, I think that was Darby and Roller.
Oh, that was the Darby one.
Can
you move that mic closer to you?
And
move the mic closer to you.
Didn't Beth Dorr pick them up or something, or some of them?
I remember that.
I think Fred said that.
So
No.
So Mike Darby doesn't have anything anymore?
Oh, he does. Yeah, he has some, but a lot of the stuff they put by the curb.
It's too bad.
And I forget where I heard it. Beth Dorr picked up a bunch of the boxes and has them somewhere.
That's wild.
Yeah.
There's your search. You got all the archives, man. Go get the rest.
Yep.
He's our archivist. That guy's got so much stuff. This house is nothing but music archives and collections.
It's a mess.
Yeah, unfortunately, Bob lost. He loaned a lot of the pictures that were shot at Rollaire to somebody who was having a party, and there was a fire, and he lost a lot of the photos. In fact, the photos that we've got up there
That was
in
the
that
story.
collage,
That was the story. The fire.
Eileen Darby had loaned me those pictures when I started teaching a rock and roll class in Essexville at Kramer Junior High. I wanted to, show the kids, well, this is what the scene was back, in the 1960s. And so she lent me the photos, and I had made copies on our printer at school. And then I kind of made a collage out of them, but I didn't keep, copies of the pictures. I mean,
they weren't yours.
I didn't see any reason for it. But I was really sorry after that fire, because at least I could have had, wouldn't have been the photograph, but these are decent copies up there.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
I've got some of them, some of the originals that I have to get back to Darby. He lent them to me, and I can't find them. But he knows it will eventually be returned.
Well, one of the things they didn't do, however, was write the names of the bands behind the pictures. Yeah. So then who are
Sometimes
these
you can
guys?
find the Saginaw News or Bay City Times article. And then, if it's one of the groups that won.
Yeah, sometimes the Times covered it. I'm not sure they did every year.
Okay.
Sometimes they had a pretty nice article on the winning band, but I don't think they did it all the time.
Because I have digital copies of probably about 50 of them. And, I don't know who any of them are.
Yeah, well, that's
Well, I know who some of them are
Right.
now, but
Yeah.
Right. You guys are the microfiche diggers, man. That's what started the podcast.
Well, one of them.
I'm sure you know this. You should see it. There's a lot of very popular Instagram accounts. Like there's one I know called Scene in Between. And they basically just post anonymous photos of 60s rock bands.
Oh, cool.
That's all. And people love it because the aesthetic and
Yeah.
the clothing. And you see
Yeah.
guys playing guitars they don't even make anymore. Teardrop shaped guitars and stuff like that. So it's like people just love the idea that existed
Oh,
in the
yeah.
time. It's such a fascinating period.
That's a cool thing I have to check into.
Yeah, and I always go through it because I'm always like, am I going to see a fake zombie here somewhere that they don't even know it's a fake zombie?
Yeah.
I'm always keeping my eyes open for
Yeah.
that stuff too.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm on the New York City, old New York City pictures page, and it's just I find all the old photos fascinating from that era. I love the jazz from that era and stuff. But back to Bay City here, there's so much that we have still yet to open on this that are still hanging around. That this is every little thing we do, including when this podcast comes out. Let's just get another step forward in the direction of hopefully getting into the right ear of the right person that does have stuff that can add more to this story or more pictures or whatever it may be.
Yeah, and I appreciate that opportunity.
Yeah,
Thank
man. Yeah, for sure. Well, you brought a record with you there, Gary.
Well, being a big Zombies fan, I had the original album back in 1969 of Odyssey and Oracle, and this must have been like maybe a reissue.
Right.
Soon as Time of the Season became a big hit, now they've got Time of the Season up there. If you look at the original album artwork, it's quite a bit different from this one. This is part of the
Yes.
album artwork, but not the entire thing.
And then my favorite part of the whole album artwork is that the word Odyssey is misspelled on the cover of the
Which
album.
you pointed out in that
which
story you
was a
wrote.
mistake that
Yeah.
they could not afford to fix. So they just pretended it was a psychedelic choice for
There
a
it
while.
is, exactly.
Time of the Season was actually the third single off the record.
Yeah.
They attempted to put out Carousel 44, which is a great song, could have been a hit, but bombed. And then they tried Butcher's Tale, which is an anti-war dirge
Yeah.
about Vietnam, and that was no chance that was going to hit. And it was
No.
a guy named Al Cooper, keyboardist
Oh, yeah.
in Bob Dylan's band and
Oh, yeah.
A&R man, who said, we should put out this song Time of the Season as a single. And actually, he bought this record in England.
Yeah, brought it back.
And he didn't even know they were on his label when he bought it, according to
Really?
the Zombies. He bought a stack of 40 records, brought them all home, said, "This is the one I really like." Took it to Ahmet Erdogan, who said, "This is sorry, not Erdogan. My apologies." Yeah, I guess it would have been. And
Well, it was
Jared
Columbia,
Wexler.
right?
Columbia, yes.
Yeah, because Date was
Date was CBS. Was CBS.
Ahmet was
it
Atlantic,
was a
though, wasn't it?
subsidiary.
Yeah.
Well, because Dick Wagner and the Frost put out 2 singles.
That was
on
Atlantic.
Date.
Yeah.
On Date.
Oh, on Date. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
That was, I'm trying to think, the Sunshine and
Yeah. That other
my,
one.
my
I know
name
what you
escapes me. I love both those
Yeah.
singles, but I can't think of the other one. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and Cooper insisted that they release Time of the Season as a single, and there was one radio station in Idaho that picked it up, and from there, all the other stations from there picked it up, and it just became a monster hit.
Was he in the Youngbloods at that time?
It
Or
would
just
have
before?
been just before, I think.
Incredible.
Yeah, and
Wow.
he's still like a vital part of their history, and I did ask him to be in the podcast, and he said no.
Oh,
Really?
But he actually just made it into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame this year. I don't know if you saw that. He got in as
I did not know that. No.
in the exec category.
Oh, really? Well, good for him.
Did you get to talk to Chris Englehart from Bay City here, the Beatles biographer or Beatles writer, and one of our journalists in town here?
No.
'Cause he talks to Al all the time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh,
They got good connection.
interesting. I did
Yeah,
not know that.
he did all like everything that the Beatles were on outside of the Beatles.
Mm-hmm.
Like he did 2 books on it. Well, 3 now.
Yeah.
But he just always updates it.
Wow.
He also did the Mark Farner story.
Okay,
with Mark.
cool. Nice.
Yeah. He
Sounds like
lives
somebody
right here in
to
town.
talk to.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, Englehart might be maybe a good person to contact if you really want to talk to Al Cooper. Maybe he
Yeah,
could
they got
put
a
in
good
the
Yeah, I
contact
might
for it.
work with that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Gary, I can't help notice you have a couple other albums there too.
Well, yeah, I was, first off, I don't understand why anybody at that label, when they listened to Odyssey and Oracle, didn't right away think that Time of the Season was the obvious single. I mean, it's such a radio-friendly song.
Yeah.
Wow. And they want to put Butcher's Tail out instead of that.
And there's been something about Time of the
Yeah, wow.
Season. Something about Time of the Season really resonates with people. Like, there have been like 13 or 14 rappers who sampled the song.
Yeah.
And it's usually
Wow.
because of the "What's your name? Who's your daddy? Is you
Yeah.
rich like me?"
Yeah,
It's
right.
an iconic lyric. There's
is.
a reason they put it on the band T-shirts. You know what I mean?
True.
Like it is a thing that's what's so amazing about art and music. And it's like all it takes is one little thing. I always say that I don't think Time of the Season would have been what it was without the
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
and all it took was a guy going to
Yeah.
make that backbeat instantly memorable.
Yeah, and that's Colin Blunstone. It's kind of his genius. He had that kind of whispery vocal on a number of their releases that it was very unique.
Yeah.
And that it worked perfectly on Time of the Season.
No, and they're also like, I think, obviously the Beatles had their female fans, but of the like rock bands from that era, it's like, especially going into the 70s, it starts to become very dude heavy. The Zombies are a band, like, you can go see them now, it's like, it's half women, half men. They're a band that, like, they do have kind of a sensitive feminine side to their sound. Colin is like, you can hear listening to him that he's like a gentle person.
Yes.
He's got this sort of like sweetness to him.
And that comes out, as soon as, I heard that, they were doing, projects after the Zombies. Colin Blunstone, so this is his first album. It's called 1 Year. And it is very, almost, it's non-rock, actually. But ballads, his particular vocal style is very out front on this thing. And then
Can I just say one thing
Yeah,
about 1
go
Year
ahead.
real quick?
yeah, sure.
So this album, 1 Year, which was it didn't do great. Actually, you'll hear about it a little in the podcast. This is some of the new stuff, but Colin's career really faltered because the other guys in the Zombies, Chris White and Rod Argent, wrote the songs, so they had the publishing money. And Colin went to work in an insurance office after Time of the Season, and then he came back. And here's my favorite part of this entire thing: this album got reissued 2 years ago on an incredible little label, right? And when I first talked to Colin about the Fake Zombies, he had no memory of it. When this album got reissued, one of the never before released tracks was a song called sing your own song about people ripping off his band. Really? And he had forgotten that he had written a song about the fake zombies.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, which I think is so cool.
It was a bonus track on the new reissue.
It is, yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah. And it's like not like it's a demo, but it's like fully orchestrated and everything. But yeah, it was really such a special thing. I remember the first time I heard it, I cried. I was like, oh my God, this is unbelievable.
Another tie to it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then another cool thing about that record is my friend Joe Wong, who's an incredible, he does the music for the TV show Russian Doll, with Natasha Lyonne. Incredible guy, composer. Right before the pandemic hit, he was going to do 2 shows, one in London and one in LA, with a full orchestra backing Colin up on the 1-year album, and then a bunch of zombies songs.
Geez.
He had I think it was a 10-piece orchestra. He was going to play with like Joey Waronker, who plays drums for Beck. All these people were going to be a part of it. Amazing guest singers. And COVID hit like a month before the shows were going to happen.
Yeah.
Wow. So I know he wants to do it again at some point. Hopefully he'll get the opportunity to do that. But yeah, that's a very special record, the 1 year. I think very underexplored record.
Yeah, and it was very well reviewed in Rolling Stone. But it just, maybe the time wasn't right for that kind of a record to come out. And then Argent put out their first album. There weren't any hits on this, but one song, Liar, was recorded by Three Dog Night, and I think it was a hit for them. Yeah. But that's really a good album also.
Yeah, and for anybody who isn't like familiar with the Zombies' music and their style, there's these 2 major forces. One is Colin's voice, and the other is Rod Argent's keyboard playing and arranging. And by the way, still doing the crazy 10-minute long solos in Hold Your Head Up Woman now. Oh, wow. He is... I think one of the times I saw them after the story came out, I went up to their manager and I was like, I want to say hi to the guys. And she goes, oh, just be careful. Rod pulled a muscle doing pull-ups. And I was like, these guys are working hard to keep their craft where it is. I think that's so cool.
Yeah. Holy crap. I remember hearing some Argent in the 70s and 80s. Then, of course, Kiss covered God Gave Rock and Roll, which I think was...
Yeah, I think it was Hold Your Head Up was the first single that really broke big for Argent.
That was right, Hold Your Head Up.
Yeah, it wasn't on this particular album. I think it was on the next one.
Yeah, and that's a monster song. I mean, that's a great... It's like almost... To me, it's like the definitive prog track.
Yeah.
One of them.
Yeah, it's a great tune.
But Chris White kind of stopped writing with him, and I thought that was a real nice combination of those 2 guys writing together.
I agree. Argent went more towards like Broadway. He did stuff with Andrew Lloyd Webber. He went more towards like musical theater for a while, film scoring and all that. And, you know, to me, Colin's always been the one that I relate to, that I love the band because of his voice and his singing. But, it seems like for a while his solo career wasn't anything like what he wanted it to be. And then the Zombies have this 80s period where they were, you know, they'd play once in a while, and when they did tour, they'd play a casino, and it wasn't, you know, it wasn't quite thing. And then it was people like Paul Weller from The Jam, Tom Petty, Beck, all these people who loved the Zombies and talked about them in interviews. And Paul Weller said that Odyssey and Oracle is his favorite album ever made.
Oh, wow.
And these are the things that started to put them back up in the consciousness, like, oh, this isn't, you know, Strawberry Alarm Clock or some other psychedelic band who maybe has a few songs. This is like a band who made a classic album and has like incredible hits outside of that too.
Wow.
And that's sort of the arc of their career over the past 10 years is the, you know, it's like they couldn't have a more perfect name.
Right.
They're the Zombies.
Yeah.
You know? And
right.
they keep going.
Yeah, and that album, you know, it shows up on a lot of lists now for the best albums of the 1960s, you know, so it's right up there with Pet Sounds and, you know, Revolver and Sgt. Pepper's and Beggar's Banquet and all these classics from the 60s.
Yeah, and the thing that Odyssey and Oracle has going for it is that it, unlike a lot of music of that time, it's not a bloated album. It's actually pretty streamlined. Like the songs flow really well together. Time of the Season goes on, 6 minutes or something like that, but the songs are relatively concise and diverse and sound different. Each one has kind of its own.
Oh, yeah.
It's dropping you into a little world. You know?
Huh. Incredible. Did you ever get to see, or any of you guys see the Fake Zombies when the Fake Zombies were?
No.
Okay. I was just curious. Maybe once
there's a review, and I think, Danny, you mentioned that right in your article. When they played the Saginaw Auditorium with Question Mark and the Mysterians, it was an all Delta promotion show. Yes. Dick Rabbit opened, and then the Fake Zombies, and then, of course, the Hometown Heroes, Question Mark and the Mysterians. But the reviewer didn't have much to say about the Zombies. He was spending most of his time, it was for the Saginaw News. Yeah. So most of it was on Question Mark and the Mysterians and the fact that they didn't have a keyboard player.
Right. I remember that.
Kind of hurts a little.
Yeah. Definitely.
Incredible time period.
Yeah.
When you did you get to hear anything after you wrote that story from Dusty Hill at all, or did he just that was it? That was the extent
no.
of it?
I'll tell you, the one interaction I've had is that there are a couple people in Los Angeles. This couple who actually there is a new documentary coming out about the Zombies. It'll be out this fall. It's directed by Robert Schwartzman, who's in the band Rooney. His brother's Jason Schwartzman from Everything.
Oh, sure. Wow.
They're both, Jason and Robert are both Zombies super fans. Jason plays in a band too that sounds kind of like the Zombies. Like, they love this band.
Wow.
But there was this couple in Beverly Hills who were starting a documentary about the Zombies, and then I think that eventually became this documentary. They kind of got the ball rolling. But they had a Christmas party. They invited me because they liked the story, and they also invited ZZ Top's manager, Bob Merlis, who's like kind of a legendary music figure. He's been around forever.
This is the more recent manager.
Yes.
Because they had Bill Hamm forever.
Yes. Yeah. And Merlis is like, he's worked with everybody. He's like with Petty for a while, like all kinds of people. Yeah. But he saw me and pretended to strangle me and said, "You're the guy who's been causing me all the trouble." But he did say on the way out the door, he said, "You ever want to talk about this again, just reach out." Like, it was good. Look,
that's cool.
It was, maybe some might define it as a crime, what happened.
But it's so old and under the bridge.
It's 50 years ago.
You could tell when Dusty wrote you, the quotes that you used, that you could tell that he was like, you know what, let's have some fun with it. I'll give him a couple things. And he's always seemed in ZZ Top history things like the fun guy. Like, he's always throwing out let's do this, let's do that. He seems like he's like always the get the ball rolling kind of guy. So. Yeah.
Well, there is a cool link to the ZZ Top thing. I cannot tell you about it until we turn the microphones off, but I'll tell you guys about it. But there is, we're getting there with that situation. Yeah.
Another for this
Zombies for this podcast. Yeah. Okay. I think there will be some way that we touch on that end of it. That's going to be really cool.
You didn't mention some of the guests that are going to be on here. Can we bring that up, or is that going to be a surprise?
I gotta wait. It's got to be a surprise because
there's some pretty heavyweight guests.
Somebody once told me that when you're making something, that when you talk about it, it releases like a little bit of the total enthusiasm that you have for it, because you get that little hit of dopamine or whatever.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to get better about not doing that stuff as much as I can. And and also it's going to be out there for people to be able to hear in like a bigger platform. And I hope everybody is as surprised as I have been by learning what I learned making this story.
Oh man! So we're going to share that with our listeners here as soon as we can get a link to that, because our podcasts are generally taped about 6 months out. Oh, nice. That's a basis of a general basis. Sometimes they go within a month or two if it's a special need to get it out. We have a few that have sat a little longer depending on where they need to go in the season, but you're right about the time for release here with this next story. So anybody, you guys want to add anything to this podcast tonight here?
Nothing to add. No.
All right. No. Well, it's good hearing from you, Fred. You had a lot to say. You going to put some of this in your next book, or did he kill the Zombies portion of your polka book?
Yeah.
Or there was no washboard in the Zombies, so it probably wasn't flying here. No, we love to mess with Fred. There's always got to be one part of the show.
I grew up in Pennsylvania. I grew up in Pennsylvania Dutch country, so I know a lot of polka music too. So.
That's awesome. Yeah, awesome. Daniel Ralston, thank you for coming on the show, man.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, it was great.
Story,
absolutely.
Man. Next part of Bay City history here.
Thanks, guys.
The MMHP is hosted on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and our own Libsyn podcast site. You can also search MMHP 989 on Facebook for up-to-the-minute information, as well as both Dr. J and Sir Fred's album picks of the week, posted every weekend. Don't forget to look for Mr. Mike's local music live series, posted frequently on MMHP's Facebook hub, as well as Scott's Mid-Mitten 15 from Harvest Canteen, featuring one-on-one interviews with Michigan music artists. You can connect with Scott on the web at scottbakermusic.com, Dr. J at michiganrockandrolllegends.com, Sir Fred at fredrife.com, Mr. Mike at YouTube at Mr. BT1. That's MRBTEE and the number 1. Brought to you by Michigan Rock and Roll Legends, located both inside the Bay County Historical Museum on Washington Avenue, as well as Scotty's Sandbar on Evergreen Drive at the Bay City Middle Grounds.
On behalf of our hosts, Dr. J, Sir Fred, Mr. Mike, and myself, this podcast wouldn't have been here without the voice of the MMHP, Mr. Eddie Switek, the generosity of the Bay County Historical Museum, which hosts the Rock and Roll Legends Hall of Fame, as well as this podcast, Mr. Alex